So it looked like DiJonai Carrington just got booted from the Dallas Wings.
What do you call a player so out of control that even referees need security just to talk to her? That's the kind of chaos DiJonai Carrington left behind when the Dallas Wings finally said enough is enough. Her highlight reel isn't just full of blocks and steals, it's packed with flagrant fouls, face shots, and straight-up reckless behavior. From poking Caitlin Clark in the eye to injuring her own teammate mid-game, Carrington's name became less about defense and more about destruction.
DiJonai, your game was stinking in the mud, and the Dallas Wings wanted nothing to do with you going forward.
The breaking point. A post-game standoff with a referee so intense, security had to step in. The WNBA had never seen anything like it, and neither had fans.
DiJonai Carrington couldn't keep her hands clean either. Would stand out of headlines on the internet. She was always in headlines, punching players in the eye. And then we have to remember, she nearly injured Paige. Like, everybody forgot about that.
This isn't just another trade. This is a player getting booted from a team that couldn't afford to defend her anymore. Today, we're diving into what really led to downfall and why Dallas had no choice but to let her go.
Y'all remember when she nearly injured Paige, nearly took her whole knee out? Like, we got to remember all of those things transpired during this basketball season, man.
At one point, DiJonai Carrington was praised for her tenacity. She was the type of player you wanted on your side, scrappy, physical, unafraid of contact. But somewhere along the way, that grit turned into something darker. What once looked like passionate defense started resembling calculated aggression. Her style didn't just push the limits of the game, it crashed through them, and the Dallas Wings found themselves forced to clean up the mess. The first red flags were easy to overlook. A hard foul here, a bump there. It was chalked up to competitiveness. But then came the first flagrant, then another. By the time Carrington had picked up her fourth flagrant foul of the season, the narrative had shifted. Fans were no longer debating whether her plays were intense or reckless. They were asking how much longer Dallas could tolerate the liability. Carrington's game had stopped being about basketball. It became about disruption. Every time she stepped on the court, you didn't know whether she'd lock down a star player or put someone's season in jeopardy. And increasingly, it was the latter. Opponents began bracing for impact whenever she was guarding them. Coaches started pleading with referees to take a closer look. Broadcasters used words like dirty, reckless, and unnecessary. The warning signs were no longer subtle. They were flashing inside the Dallas locker room. Things weren't much better. Teammates reportedly grew uneasy, not just because of the fouls, but because of what those fouls meant for them. One second, you're trying to contest a shot. The next, you're standing next to a player who might turn the entire arena against your team with one wild swing of her arm. You could sense the tension. You could feel the pressure. The front office knew what was happening, but for a while, they hesitated. Carrington had talent. She brought intensity. She had moments of brilliance. But those moments were being drowned out by headlines and viral clips of chaos. And when fans started calling out the organization for letting it continue, the tipping point arrived. The truth is, you can't build a championship culture when your own players are more known for fights than finishes. When opposing stars are getting poked in the eye and your teammates are getting caught in the crossfire, something has to give. And for the Dallas Wings, the message became clear. DiJonai Carrington wasn't just making highlight reels. She was making enemies on the court, in the locker room, and across the league. What happened next wouldn't just define her season, it would define her entire reputation, because Carrington wasn't done yet. In fact, her most infamous moment was just around the corner. It was the moment that lit the fuse on everything. A single play, captured from multiple angles, broadcast to millions, and suddenly, DiJonai Carrington's name was on every screen in America. The 2024 WNBA playoffs had been electric. Caitlin Clark, the rookie phenom, was leading the Indiana Fever on an improbable run. But during a high-stakes matchup against the Connecticut Sun, all that momentum came crashing to a halt in one brutal second. Clark went up for a shot textbook form. Her signature style, Carrington closed in for the block, aggressive as ever. But what happened next didn't look like defense. It looked personal. Carrington's hand didn't just swipe for the ball, went straight into Clark's face, directly hitting her in the eye. Clark's head jerked back, and she immediately grabbed her face in visible pain. The entire arena went silent. Fans were frozen. Commentators went off script. Replays told the story frame by frame. None of it looked good for Carrington. The result? Clark was left with a black eye that would become the most talked about injury of the postseason. Memes exploded. Tweets flew. Headlines didn't mince words. Dirty play, intentional, out of control. And yet, when Carrington faced reporters afterward, she acted as if it was no big deal. Her words didn't just fall flat, they sparked even more outrage. "I didn't know I hit her," she said. "I was just trying to make a play on the ball." That might have worked if the footage didn't exist, but it didn't. It showed everything: the reach, the contact, the follow-through. Fans weren't buying it. Analysts weren't buying it. Even neutral players in the league quietly questioned the legitimacy of her defense. Because here's the thing: in basketball, physicality is part of the game. But when that physicality consistently ends with someone getting hurt tesselessly, a star like Caitlin Clark stops being acceptable. What made it worse was the total lack of remorse. No apology, no accountability, just a smug post-game demeanor that rubbed everyone the wrong way. The message Carrington sent that night wasn't just that she played hard, it was that she didn't care who got hurt in the process. This wasn't her first incident, but it was the one that exposed the pattern to the entire league. Suddenly, fans were going back, reviewing past games, compiling clips, and building the case. The eye poke was no longer just a one-off. Mistake it was evidence. The proof that Carrington wasn't misunderstood. She was reckless and unapologetic about it. For Dallas, this moment was the beginning of the end. The pressure from fans, the media, and even inside the league office began to mount. People wanted answers. People wanted consequences. And yet, Carrington kept playing, as if nothing had changed. But the truth? Everything had. And the next time she stepped on the court, the eyes of the league were watching her closer than ever. Just when you thought the Caitlin Clark incident was an isolated explosion, DiJonai Carrington doubled down. And this time, her target wasn't a rookie, it was one of the most respected veterans in the league, Skylar Diggins-Smith. If the Clark eye poke raised questions, what happened next gave us answers. The pattern wasn't just real, it was undeniable. It was June 4th, the Dallas Wings were facing off against the Seattle Storm. The game was intense, but clean until Carrington stepped in. Skylar Diggins, in full stride, took off on a fast break. All she had to do was finish at the rim. But just as she rose up, Carrington closed in with her signature speed, and something else recklessness. What should have been a contested layup turned into another dangerous moment. Carrington swung in hard and made direct contact with Diggins' head. The crowd gasped. Diggins hit the floor, visibly shaken. Trainers rushed in. The referees didn't hesitate. They immediately called a flagrant one foul. And as the replays played over and over on the Jumbotron, fans realized this wasn't about hard defense. This was personal. This was targeted. And most importantly, this was the second time in less than a month. Carrington had gone after a star player's face. Skylar Diggins isn't just another player. She's a multiple-time All-Star, a veteran leader, and a beloved figure in the WNBA. And for Carrington to hit her the way she did sent a message not just to the league, but to every player watching. No one was safe. If Caitlin Clark's black, I was a warning shot. Diggins getting knocked down was a confirmation. Carrington wasn't changing. In fact, she was escalating. Analysts on broadcasts that night tried to justify the contact. Maybe it was incidental, maybe it was bad timing, but even they couldn't ignore the facts. 2 high-profile face shots. 2 stars taken out of rhythm. 2 plays that had one thing in common. DiJonai Carrington was right in the middle of it. Social media erupted again. Fans called her a repeat offender. Clips of both incidents, side by side, flooded timelines. And when you watched them back to back, the similarities were chilling. Same aggressive closeout, same head contact, same lack of concern. Even seasoned referees began to shift how they approached Carrington. They were quicker with whistles, more twirls, alert on her movements, because at this point, the WNBA couldn't afford another high-profile injury caused by one of their own. And Carrington's reaction? Silence. No apology to Diggins. No acknowledgement that anything had gone wrong. Just business as usual. But this wasn't usual anymore. The narrative had shifted. Carrington wasn't seen as physical, she was seen as a danger. And the Diggins foul wasn't the final straw. It was just the next domino to fall in a sequence that would end with Dallas saying goodbye. Because after this play, the question was no longer if DiJonai Carrington would be punished, it was when. By the time DiJonai Carrington stepped onto the court against the Minnesota Lynx on May 21st, the warnings had already piled up. But this time, it wasn't an opponent who paid the price. It was one of her own. In a game that should have been routine, Carrington's recklessness reached a new level, one that turned her into a threat not just to the other team, but to the Dallas Wings themselves. It began like so many of her other questionable plays. The ball was in transition, the Lynx pushed it down court, and Jessica Shepard went up for a clean shot. Carrington, as usual, came flying in arms, flailing eyes locked, ignoring every basic principle of safe defense. She wasn't going for a block, she was going for impact. What happened next was chaos. Carrington's hand reached straight across Shepard's face, connecting with a full-force swipe that stunned the arena. Officials immediately called it a flagrant foul, and replays made it impossible to argue otherwise. But this time, the aftermath didn't end with just the opposing player on the floor. As Shepard crashed down, it was Carrington's own teammate Paige Bueckers who got caught in the fall. Bueckers had positioned herself near the paint, completely uninvolved in the play. But Carrington's wild momentum, combined with Shepard's body being thrown off balance, resulted in a direct collision. Bueckers, trying to break Shepard's fall, twisted awkwardly. Trainers sprinted onto the court as Dallas fans held their breath. Just like that, Carrington had managed to injure her own teammate while trying to take out another player. It wasn't just poor judgment, it was complete disregard for the safety of anyone around her. Commentators were stunned. "You don't get to plow through someone's back and almost blow out your teammate's knee," one analyst said, "and then laugh it off like it's nothing." But that's exactly what Carrington did. Cameras caught her grinning, waving off the play, trying to make light of what had just happened. She even mimicked a fan meme, striking a pose for attention, as if the moment wasn't serious. It was a slap in the face to every player who puts their body on the line for the game. Inside the Dallas locker room, something changed. Teammates had already been uneasy with Carrington's aggressive antics, but now the line had been crossed. Paige Bueckers, young, talented, and a potential future star, was nearly sidelined because of someone wearing the same jersey. It too. Comment sections were flooded with clips of the incident. People asked the obvious question: if you can't trust your own teammate not to hurt you, how do you play your game? Even the Minnesota coaching staff, who'd seen their own player get hit, looked visibly stunned. Because Carrington didn't just disrupt a single play, she turned the court into a war zone. From that point on, Carrington wasn't just a liability. On defense, she was a walking risk to her own team's future, and the Dallas Wings knew it. The only question left was, how much longer could they justify keeping her? If the eye poke on Caitlin Clark raised eyebrows, and the Paige Bueckers incident raised alarms, then what happened on May 30th set the entire league on fire. It was no longer about fouls, injuries, or even reckless defense. This time, DiJonai Carrington crossed a line that no one in professional basketball had ever seen before. Because when a referee and official trained to handle pressure, conflict, and intensity feels so unsafe around a player that he calls for security, that's not basketball anymore. That's a crisis. It happened after a tough 97-92 loss to the Chicago Sky. The game had already been emotionally charged. Carrington had played her usual brand of chaotic, high-contact basketball. But what happened? After the final whistle was what truly shocked everyone. As players started walking off the court, Carrington approached referee Roy Golbian. It looked like a standard post-game exchange at first, until suddenly, Golbian signaled for security personnel to intervene. Fans didn't understand what they were seeing. Why was an official summoning security guards? Was there a fan altercation? A fight? But as footage rolled in, it became clear this wasn't about the crowd. This was about Carrington. The referee had called for backup to protect himself from her. Let that sink in. A professional referee, someone who deals with players shouting in his face every night. felt the need to get a security escort because of DiJonai Carrington's behavior. That moment was unprecedented in WNBA history. No player, male or female, had ever been so volatile on the court that it triggered a security response from an official. Social media exploded. One fan tweeted, "She's not just a dirty player. Anymore, she's dangerous." Another asked, "How many red flags does a team need before they cut ties?" But it wasn't just fans. Even legends of the game weighed in. Cheryl Swoops, a WNBA icon, tried to defend Carrington, saying the ref had overreacted, but that only made things worse. Because defending someone who made a grown man in a striped jersey fear for his safety, that doesn't make you loyal. It makes you look blind. Carrington didn't help her case either. She went on social media and posted, "Security when I'm literally having a civil conversation is insane." But here's the thing, when your version of a civil conversation ends with a referee calling for help, you've already lost the benefit of the doubt. At some point, perception is reality. And her reality was catching up to her fast. This moment was the breaking point for Dallas. Everything they had tried to ignore, every foul, every headline, every sideline outburst, came crashing down in a single embarrassing incident that played out in front of national cameras. Because when a referee fears a player so much, he calls for security, that's no longer a disciplinary issue. That's a liability. And DiJonai Carrington had just become too big of one to ignore. The decision was no longer difficult. It was inevitable. The moment security was called on DiJonai Carrington, the clock started ticking. And just days later, the Dallas Wings made their move. On the surface, it looked like a routine trade. Teams swap players all the time in professional sports. This wasn't strategy, this was damage control. Carrington had gone from being a gritty defender to the league's most controversial headline. The Wings didn't just want her gone, they needed her gone. The deal came fast. Dallas shipped Carrington off to the Minnesota Lynx in exchange for Diamond Miller, Carly Samuelson, and a 2027 second-round draft pick. For fans, it was like Christmas morning. The relief across the Wings fan base was instant. No more highlight reels of dirty plays, no more post-game brawls, no more referees signaling for backup. Just peace. Let's be clear, this was not a move Dallas wanted to make. They had invested in Carrington. They believed in her potential. But belief only lasts so long when the headlines start piling up and your team becomes a punchline. The Wings management had finally hit the wall. Enough was enough, and the return they got wasn't just about clearing out a problem, it was about rebuilding trust. Diamond Miller, the former #2 overall pick in the 2023 WNBA draft, brought talent and maturity. Her rookie season had been solid 12.1 points per game, over 3 rebounds, and efficiency from beyond the arc. In 2025, she was shooting nearly 54% from three-point range. A perfect fit for a Dallas team that needed scorers who stayed out of trouble. Then there was Carly Samuelson, not flashy, but dependable. A veteran presence with real shooting ability and a calm court demeanor. Yes, she was recovering from a foot injury, but the Wings weren't concerned, because you can rehab an ankle. You can't rehab attitude. Importantly, neither of these players had ever been the subject of a referee calling security. That, on its own, made them a better fit for a franchise that had just been dragged through the mud. And what about Minnesota? That's the head-scratcher. Why would a championship contending team, sitting at 24-5, willingly import this kind of chaos into their locker room? Maybe they believed Cheryl Reeve, the Lynx' head coach, could tame the storm. Maybe they thought Carrington just needed a change of scenery. Or maybe they were desperate to plug holes after star forward Nafisa Collier went down with an injury. Whatever the reasoning, the gamble is massive. Minnesota didn't just acquire a player, they inherited a public relations bomb. Because if Carrington brings that same energy to a team with real title hopes, she might not just ruin her own reputation. She could derail their entire season. But for Dallas, this was a clean break. No more excuses, no more controversy. Just basketball. And that's the kind of trade every franchise hopes for, not just talent in return, but peace of mind. The drama had finally left the building. Or had it just moved north? When the Minnesota Lynx confirmed the trade for DiJonai Carrington, jaws dropped across the league. This wasn't just any team making a roster move. This was a championship contender, a 24-5 powerhouse, willingly inviting the most controversial player in the WNBA into their locker room. On paper, it made no sense. Off paper, it felt like a ticking time bomb. Let's talk about the risk. Carrington didn't arrive with questions about her talent. She's athletic, fast, and capable of playing intense in-your-face defense. But talent has never been the issue. Her reputation, dirty fouls, zero accountability, and confrontations with officials overshadows everything she brings to the game. And now Minnesota, a team known for structure and discipline, is taking on the challenge of trying to fix her. The big theory. Cheryl Reeve, the legendary Lynx head coach, is widely regarded as one of the best leaders in the game. She's tough, she's strategic, she knows how to manage egos. Supporters of the trade argue that if anyone can reel Carrington in, it's Reeve. But the reality is more complicated. Reeve isn't a miracle worker, and Carrington isn't just an edgy player. She's been a walking headline for all the wrong reasons. And let's not forget, this move wasn't made in a vacuum. It came right after star forward Napheesa Collier suffered an ankle injury, throwing Minnesota's playoff ambitions into uncertainty. Maybe the front office panicked. Maybe they thought adding Carrington would at least bring defensive pressure in Collier's absence. But that kind of desperation rarely builds chemistry. It usually destroys it. Inside the locker room, the challenge is even bigger. Carrington is walking into a team where roles are clearly defined and the culture is rooted in mutual respect. What happens the first time she goes too far in practice? What happens when a teammate catches an elbow or hears one of Carrington's infamous trash-talking tirades? Will they tolerate it? Or will the tension crack wide open? It's not like this hasn't happened before. Carrington's tenure in Dallas was marred by more than just fouls. Her own teammates grew tired of her antics. Paige Beckers nearly blew out her knee thanks to Carrington's reckless play. And instead of concern, Carrington laughed it off. Now she's expected to be a reliable contributor in a playoff atmosphere. That's not just optimism, that's blind faith. Minnesota's fan base is split. Some are excited by the defensive edge Carrington could bring. Others are wondering how long it'll take before she becomes a liability on or off the court. One viral comment said it best: "You don't bring gasoline to a forest fire and expect it to put out the flames." The stakes are higher than ever. The Lynx didn't just trade for a player, they took on a storm with no off switch. The next few weeks will either be the redemption arc of the season or the moment Minnesota regrets ever answering Dallas' call. For DiJonai Carrington, this isn't just a fresh start, it's her final warning. After everything that's happened, from flagrant fouls to nearly injuring her own teammates to getting security called on her by a referee, there's no more room for excuses. The trade to Minnesota isn't just a relocation, it's a test. And if she fails this one, there may not be another. Minnesota didn't just take a chance, they took a massive public risk. The Lynx have spent years building a championship culture rooted in discipline, teamwork, and accountability. Carrington, on the other hand, arrives with a resume of chaos. Whether she realizes it or not, this is likely her last chance to prove she belongs in the league, not as a walking controversy, but as a real contributor to a winning team. The issue isn't just perception, it's production. Carrington has struggled to deliver consistent offense this season. Her shooting percentages are low, her minutes have dropped, and she's been buried on the bench during critical fourth-quarter stretches. Coaches across the league have noticed, and when your name is bigger than your game, your leash gets shorter, especially in a league where competition is fierce and roster spots are limited. She's also carrying the weight of her own words. Not long ago, Carrington made headlines for saying players should sit out if they don't get what they want from the league. But the irony now is undeniable: she's the one who hasn't earned what she wants. She's not dominating games. She's not a reliable closer. And now, she's not even safe from being traded mid-season. Minnesota has no time for nonsense. Head coach Cheryl Reeve isn't going to baby anyone, especially not during a championship run. If Carrington steps out of line or off the court seat, be benched. And not just metaphorically. She'll be buried at the end of the bench, far from the spotlight she seems to chase. Reeve's message is clear: bring your game, not your drama. That's the harsh reality Carrington faces. It's one more outburst, one more reckless foul, one more viral clip for the wrong reasons, and it could be the end of her WNBA career. No more second chances. No more debates about intent. The league has already tolerated more than it should have, but it's a big if she can shift gears. Focus on the fundamentals and stop making herself the story. There might still be time for redemption. She has the physical tools. She has the stage. What she doesn't have is the benefit of the doubt. For Carrington, this moment is everything. A clean slate with a championship-caliber team. A chance to rewrite the narrative or blow it all up for good, because if she crashes in Minnesota, it won't just be another trade, it'll be the final chapter. The end of her WNBA story. DiJonai Carrington didn't just get traded, she got exposed. What started as a reputation for aggressive defense spiraled into a full-blown crisis of character, one foul at a time. From poking Caitlin Clark in the eye, to decking Skylar Diggins, to nearly injuring her own teammate, and finally forcing a referee to call security. Carrington became more headline than highlight. The Dallas Wings had no choice. They weren't managing a player anymore. They were managing a liability. Now, she's Minnesota's gamble. A team chasing a championship just welcomed a storm into their locker room, hoping it doesn't blow everything apart. Maybe Cheryl Reeve can pull off a miracle. Maybe Carrington will grow up and clean up her game. But one thing is clear, this is her last chance. If she brings the same chaos to the Lynx, the league won't wait around to see how it ends. Because talent might get you drafted, but behavior gets you traded. Again and again until no team picks up the phone. If you're tired of Carrington's antics, drop a comment below and let your voice be heard. Like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss what happens next. Because this story, it's far from over.